The soft blue glow of the research terminal cast shadows across Mara Ellison's face as she studied the molecular structure rotating on her screen. Behind the reinforced glass of Auriga Outpost's xenobiology lab, the iridescent mollusk-like creatures undulated in their pressurized tanks. Their translucent mantles pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, beautiful, hypnotic, and potentially lethal. "Remarkable defensive mechanism," Mara murmured, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face as she tapped notes into her datapad. "The neurotoxin bypasses conventional fear responses and targets the amygdala directly." The creatures, dubbed cephalopods auriga by the classification team, had been discovered 3 months ago in the methane seas of the gas giant's largest moon. Initial samples had revealed their unique biochemistry. When threatened, they released a compound that induced paralyzing terror in predators. For a xenopsychologist like Mara, they represented a fascinating window into alien neurochemistry. For others on the station, they represented something far more practical. The laboratory door hissed open behind her. Governor Lin Zhao entered, followed by Captain Victor Yates, whose broad shoulders and rigid posture seemed perpetually ready for confrontation. The security chief's presence at what should have been a routine research update immediately put Mara on edge. "Dr. Ellison," Governor Zhao greeted with a diplomatic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I understand you've made progress with the extraction process." Mara nodded cautiously. "We've isolated the compound and synthesized small quantities. The molecular structure is unlike anything in our databases. It's extraordinary from a purely scientific perspective." "And from a practical perspective," Captain Yates interjected, his gaze fixed not on Mara, but on the creatures in their tanks. "If you're referring to applications, we're still in early research phases," Mara replied carefully. "We don't fully understand how it affects human neurochemistry. The preliminary tests on tissue samples suggest it triggers fear responses without physical harm. But you verified it works," Yates cut in. "That's the bottom line." Governor Zhao gave him a warning glance before turning back to Mara. "Central Command is interested in your findings. Dr. Ellison, they've authorized a demonstration for tomorrow. Nothing excessive, just a controlled environment test to document effects." Mara felt her jaw tighten. "Governor, with respect, we haven't completed safety protocols. We don't know the long-term effects or dosage parameters. Rushing to demonstration stage violates basic research ethics." "Your concerns are noted," Zhao replied with the practiced neutrality of a career administrator. "But the decision has been made. Captain Yates's team will handle security measures, and Lieutenant Ortiz will monitor medical readings. We'll use the smallest effective concentration." "And the test subject?" Mara asked, already dreading the answer. Yates smiled thinly. "Volunteer from the security team. Rodriguez has agreed to participate." "Rodriguez is under your command," Mara countered. "That's hardly informed consent in a military hierarchy. This is a frontier research station. Dr. Ellison," Yates said, "we all serve Central Command's interests. Some of us just remember that more clearly than others." After they left, Mara remained at her terminal, her reflection ghostly in the darkened screen. The outpost had been established for scientific exploration, not weapons development, yet increasingly, research priorities were shifting toward applications that made her deeply uncomfortable. She pulled up Rodriguez's file. Young, eager to impress, recent transfer from the inner colonies. Probably didn't fully understand what he was volunteering for. Mara made a decision then that would alter the course of her life and the future of Auriga Outpost. "If we're doing this," she whispered to the empty lab, "we're doing it right." The demonstration chamber had been configured with observation windows on 3 sides. Medical monitoring equipment lined one wall, while atmospheric controls had been calibrated to contain and, if necessary, rapidly evacuate the gas. Lieutenant Ria Ortiz, the outpost's chief medical officer, was arranging sensor patches on a nervous-looking Rodriguez. "These will transmit vital signs in real time," Ortiz explained, her manner professional, but her eyes concerned. "Any significant deviation from baseline, and we terminate the test immediately." Governor Zhao stood beside Captain Yates behind the safety glass, along with 3 representatives from Central Command who had arrived on the morning shuttle. Their presence confirmed Mara's suspicions about the true nature of this demonstration. Mara entered with a sealed container, holding the synthesized gas cylinder. She placed it carefully into the delivery system, then approached Rodriguez. "I want to verify your consent one more time," she said quietly. "You understand this compound affects fear responses in ways we don't fully comprehend. The effects should be temporary, but—" "I'm good, Dr. Ellison," Rodriguez interrupted with forced bravado. "Captain Yates explained everything. Just a few minutes of discomfort for the advancement of science, right?" Mara studied his face. "And if I told you this isn't just about science, that there are military applications being considered?" Rodriguez's expression flickered uncertainly, but Yates's voice came through the communication system. "Dr. Ellison, please complete preparation protocols and exit the chamber." Mara held Rodriguez's gaze a moment longer, then nodded and turned toward the exit. As she reached the door, she paused, making a swift decision that would change everything. "There's a problem with the delivery calibration," she announced, turning back. "I need to make a manual adjustment." Yates frowned. "Can't your research assistant handle that?" "Not if we want accurate results," Mara replied firmly. "Give me 3 minutes." She returned to the gas delivery system, making a show of checking various settings. What the observers couldn't see was her adjusting the concentration downward and reprogramming the release timer. Then, she did something none of them expected. "Rodriguez, you're dismissed," she said clearly. "What?" Rodriguez and Yates spoke simultaneously. Mara straightened, facing the observation window. "I'm volunteering as the test subject." Governor Zhao's eyes widened. "Dr. Ellison, that's not the protocol." "The protocol is flawed," Mara interrupted. "I'm the researcher most familiar with this compound. I can provide real-time verbal feedback on its effects that Rodriguez cannot, and more importantly, I'm offering my informed consent without pressure from the command structure." Behind the glass, the Central Command representatives were exchanging interested glances. One of them leaned toward Yates, speaking too quietly for Mara to hear, but the security chief's expression darkened. "Very well," Zhao finally replied. "But Lieutenant Ortiz, prepare a sedative in case Dr. Ellison's reactions become unpredictable." Ortiz nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't comfortable with any of this. She quickly transferred the monitoring patches to Mara before exiting the chamber. Alone now, Mara seated herself in the center of the room, establishing a measured breathing pattern. Years of meditation practice, as part of her xenopsychology training, had taught her techniques for maintaining mental equilibrium under stress. She would need every bit of that training now. "Beginning gas release in 30 seconds, the automated system announced. Mara closed her eyes briefly. "I'm ready." The soft hiss of the release valve was barely audible. A faint mist entered the chamber, odorless and invisible except for the slightest distortion of light around it. Mara took a deliberate breath, feeling the compound enter her lungs. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the world changed. The expected wave of terror didn't come. Instead, Mara experienced a strange clarity, as though her consciousness had expanded. She could feel her heart rate increase slightly, but rather than panic, she felt her senses sharpen. The monitoring equipment's steady beeping became distinct, individual tones. The subtle vibrations of the station's life support systems resonated through the floor into her body. Most remarkably, she became aware of the emotional states of those watching her, not through observation, but through a direct perception that bypassed her normal senses. Governor Zhao's administrative calculation, Ortiz's medical concern, the cold interest of the Central Command representatives, all were suddenly as tangible to Mara as physical sensations. And Captain Yates, his mind was a storm of ambition and determination, with undercurrents of something darker, something that made Mara's newly enhanced perception recoil. Subject appears to be experiencing no visible distress. Ortiz's voice came through the speakers, confusion evident. Heart rate elevated but within normal parameters. Brain activity shows increased frontal lobe function rather than amygdala stimulation. Mara opened her eyes, looking directly at the observation window. "I can sense your disappointment, Captain," she said calmly. "You expected me to be incapacitated." Yates leaned forward to the microphone. "What are you experiencing, Dr. Ellison?" "Not fear," Mara replied. "The compound appears to have a different effect on consciousness than anticipated. I hypothesize that my meditation training has created neural pathways that process the compound differently." What she didn't say was that she was experiencing something far more significant, a telepathic resonance that the gas had somehow facilitated. The cephalopods auriga didn't produce this compound as a weapon. She now understood. But as a communication medium, in their native environment, it allowed them to share perceptions across distances, to function as a collective intelligence when needed. And now, it was allowing her to perceive the true purpose behind this demonstration. "Increase the concentration," ordered one of the Central Command representatives. "That would violate our safety protocols," Ortiz objected. "Do it," Yates commanded, overriding her. Mara felt the shift as more of the compound entered the chamber. Her perception expanded further, beyond the observation room, reaching throughout the station. Fragments of thoughts, intentions, and emotions from the entire crew filtered through her consciousness. And with this expanded awareness came understanding. Auriga Outpost wasn't just a research station. Its secondary purpose was weapons development. The fear gas was just one of several biological agents being studied for military applications. And Captain Yates wasn't merely following orders. He was the architect of the program, using Governor Zhao's political ambitions to advance his agenda. "Remarkable," Mara said aloud, standing now. "The compound doesn't induce fear at all. That's a misinterpretation based on observing predator reactions. Its primary function is consciousness expansion and telepathic linkage." Through the glass, she saw Yates's expression harden. He reached for the emergency protocols panel. "Terminate the test," he ordered. "Purge the chamber and lock it down." Mara moved quickly to the gas cylinder, disconnecting it from the delivery system before the purge could begin. "I wouldn't do that, Captain. Not until everyone understands what's really happening here." Alarms began to sound as the system detected the manual override. Security doors throughout the section sealed automatically. "Dr. Ellison, return to the center of the room immediately," Yates commanded through the speaker system. Mara ignored him, removing the cylinder and holding it carefully. "This isn't a weapon, Captain. It's a communication tool. The cephalopods auriga use it to share consciousness when threatened. What you've interpreted as a fear response in test subjects is actually a sudden expansion of awareness that untrained minds can't process." "She's delusional," Yates said to the others. "The compound is affecting her cognitive functions." "No," Mara countered, her voice steady. "I can perceive your intentions clearly now. Captain, the Black Budget Weapons Program. The plans to weaponize not just this compound, but 3 others being researched in the restricted laboratories. Your reports directly to military intelligence, bypassing colonial administration protocols." Governor Zhao turned to Yates, her expression shocked. "What is she talking about?" "Don't listen to her," Yates snapped. "The toxin is causing hallucinations." But Mara could see the sudden doubt in Zhao's eyes. She pressed her advantage. "Governor, access security file Yates Lambda 7 on your personal terminal. You'll find the documentation there. He's been using your authorization codes for months. The atmosphere in the observation room changed palpably. One of the Central Command representatives was speaking urgently into a communicator, while another was watching Yates with newfound wariness. Mara knew she had only moments before Yates took more drastic action. Her expanded consciousness showed her the security team he had already summoned, moving quickly through the station corridors toward the laboratory section. "Lieutenant Ortiz," Mara called. "The medical scanner will confirm my vitals are stable. What you're witnessing isn't toxin-induced delusion, but a neurocognitive enhancement. The compound temporarily rewires synaptic pathways to allow perception beyond normal sensory limits." Ortiz hesitated, then checked her medical display. "She's right about her vitals. Brain activity is unprecedented but organized, not chaotic as we'd expect with a neurotoxin." "Enough of this," Yates growled. He turned to the security console and initiated an emergency override. The observation room door slid open, and he entered the test chamber himself, hand on his sidearm. "Put down the cylinder, Dr. Ellison," he ordered. "You're experiencing a psychological break and endangering the station." Mara didn't move. "The only danger to this station is the weaponization program you've been running without proper oversight. How many test subjects in the restricted labs, Captain? How many lives sacrificed to develop the perfect bioweapon?" Yates drew his weapon. "Last warning." In the observation room, Governor Zhao was reviewing data on her tablet, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "Captain Yates," she called sharply, "stand down immediately. I'm seeing unauthorized research protocols under your authorization." "You don't understand what's at stake," Yates replied, without taking his eyes off Mara. "Central Command needs these defensive capabilities. The outer colonies are vulnerable." "Defensive?" Mara challenged. "There's nothing defensive about a compound designed to incapacitate entire populations with terror. That's what you've been working toward. Not the compound in its natural state, but a modified version that bypasses the cognitive enhancement and targets only the fear response." The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of Yates's security team, 4 armed officers who took positions at the chamber entrance. "Detain Dr. Ellison and confiscate the research materials," Yates ordered them. But the officers hesitated, looking toward Governor Zhao, who had emerged from the observation room. "Belay that order," Zhao countered. "Captain Yates, surrender your weapon and report to my office immediately." Yates didn't move. "Governor, with respect, you're interfering with a Central Command security operation." "Am I?" Zhao replied coldly. She turned to the Central Command representatives. "Is anyone here authorized to confirm Captain Yates's claim about a black-budget weapons program at my station?" The representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, the senior member spoke. "We're here to observe research progress, Governor. Captain Yates's initiative in developing military applications exceeds our current authorization parameters." Mara could sense the shift in the room as the truth emerged. Yates was increasingly isolated, his authority crumbling. But that made him more dangerous, not less. His mind was racing through options, calculating angles, and settling on a desperate plan. Before anyone could react, Yates lunged toward the environmental control panel, smashing his palm against the emergency release. Alarms blared as the system announced, "Warning, atmospheric containment breach, sealing laboratory section." "If the compound is so beneficial, Dr. Ellison," Yates said with cold determination, "let's see how the entire section responds to a maximum dose." He had triggered a catastrophic release of the remaining gas reserves from the main storage tank, not just the small cylinder Mara held. Throughout the laboratory wing, the compound was now flooding through the ventilation system. Security personnel and medical staff in the vicinity would be exposed within minutes. Without Mara's mental training, they would experience the unfiltered consciousness expansion as overwhelming terror. "You've just condemned dozens of crew members to psychological trauma," Mara said, her enhanced perception already feeling the first ripples of panic spreading through nearby sections. "I've created a scenario that proves the compound's strategic value," Yates countered. "When Central Command reviews the incident, they'll understand its potential." Governor Zhao was already at the communication panel, ordering emergency protocols and evacuation of affected areas. Lieutenant Ortiz rushed to prepare emergency sedatives for affected personnel. Mara knew there wasn't time for conventional countermeasures. The compound was spreading too quickly. But her enhanced consciousness showed her another solution, one that required embracing the compound's true nature rather than fighting it. "You forgot something crucial, Captain," Mara said, turning to face him fully. "Fear doesn't work on free minds." She inhaled deeply, deliberately drawing in more of the compound, pushing her consciousness to its limits. The world around her seemed to slow as her perception expanded beyond the station, touching the vast emptiness of space and the teeming life of the moon below. For a moment, she felt her identity dissolving into the greater awareness. Then, she reasserted her will, channeling the expanded consciousness toward a single purpose: connection. Through the compound, now saturating the air, Mara extended her telepathic awareness to every affected crew member, creating a network of minds. Rather than each person facing the overwhelming expansion of consciousness alone, she created a shared experience, a guided journey through the initial disorientation into clarity. "You are not alone," she projected to the confused and frightened minds connecting to the network. "What you're experiencing is consciousness expansion, not fear. Breathe, accept, integrate." Throughout the affected sections, panic began to subside as crew members experienced Mara's guiding presence. The compound that might have caused mass hysteria instead became a medium for unprecedented unity of thought and purpose. And through this shared consciousness, the truth of Yates's program became visible to all. Not just his unauthorized weapons research, but the experimental subjects in the restricted laboratories, political prisoners from distant colonies, used to test increasingly potent versions of various compounds. Yates realized what was happening too late. He raised his weapon toward Mara, but found himself surrounded by security officers who had entered the chamber, their minds now linked to the collective awareness Mara had created. "Captain Victor Yates," announced the lead officer, "you're detained pending investigation for unauthorized human experimentation, sabotage of station systems, and attempted murder." As Yates was disarmed and restrained, Mara maintained the telepathic network, guiding the collective consciousness toward the environmental controls. Through shared intention, they activated the emergency filtration system, gradually clearing the compound from the station's atmosphere. One by one, crew members began to disconnect from the network as the compound's concentration diminished. Each retained clear memory of the shared consciousness and the revelations it had brought. Governor Zhao approached Mara as the last traces of the compound were filtered from the demonstration chamber. "Dr. Ellison," she said quietly, "I believe we have much to discuss about the future of this research." Mara nodded, her ordinary consciousness returning as the compound's effects faded. "Yes, Governor. Beginning with what the cephalopods Auriga have been trying to teach us all along." 3 weeks later, Mara stood before the newly configured research tanks in what had previously been the restricted laboratory wing. The entire section had been redesigned, with the formerly secret facilities now converted to legitimate research purposes. Central Command's investigation had resulted in the removal of all weapons development programs from Auriga Outpost and a formal recommitment to its original scientific mission. Captain Yates and his closest collaborators had been transported back to Earth for trial. The political prisoners found in the restricted laboratories were receiving treatment and rehabilitation, and Governor Zhao, chastened by how much had occurred without her knowledge, had implemented new transparency protocols throughout the station. Lieutenant Ortiz entered, carrying a data tablet. "The last test results from the volunteer group," she said, handing it to Mara. Fascinating stuff. The temporary telepathic effects have faded completely, but they're showing enhanced cognitive integration, improved emotional regulation, and heightened empathy. No negative side effects detected. Mara reviewed the data. Exactly as I suspected. The compound doesn't create capabilities that weren't there. It removes the barriers between them. The fear response was never its purpose. And these? Ortiz asked, gesturing toward the cephalopods auriga, undulating peacefully in their habitat. They're not just producing a defensive toxin, Mara explained. They're reaching out, in their natural environment. They use the compound to form temporary collective consciousness during times of environmental stress. It's how they solve problems too complex for individual minds. Ortiz considered this. So they were offering us a gift, not a weapon. Precisely, Mara agreed. And we nearly turned that gift into something terrible. The door slid open again as Governor Zhao entered, accompanied by a distinguished-looking woman in colonial administration uniform. Dr. Ellison, Zhao said formally. May I present Director Suarez from the Xenobiological Research Division. She's here to discuss your proposal for the outpost's new direction. Director Suarez stepped forward, extending her hand. Dr. Ellison, your report on the consciousness-expanding properties of the compound is the most significant xenobiological discovery in decades. The potential for improved cross-species communication alone justifies a complete reorientation of the outpost's mission. Mara shook her hand. Thank you, Director. Though I can't take full credit, the cephalopods auriga are the true innovators here. We're just beginning to understand what they've been trying to show us. Which is why colonial administration has approved your proposal. Suarez continued. Auriga Outpost will be redesignated as the Center for Xenobiological Communication Studies, with you as Chief Research Officer. Your focus on ethical engagement with alien consciousness aligns perfectly with our new directives, following the irregularities of the previous administration. The diplomatic understatement of Yates's crimes wasn't lost on Mara, but she appreciated the institutional acknowledgement of wrongdoing, however carefully phrased. I'm honored, she replied, and I believe the research team is ready to proceed with the revised protocols. After the officials departed, Mara remained alone with the creatures. She approached the tank, placing her palm against the transparent barrier. The nearest cephalopod auriga drifted toward her, its mantle pulsing with patterns of bioluminescence that seemed almost like language. Without the compound in her system, Mara couldn't directly perceive its consciousness as she had during those extraordinary moments of connection. But something of that experience remained with her, an intuitive understanding that transcended conventional communication. We almost made a terrible mistake, she said softly to the creature, turning your gift into a weapon. But you showed us another way. The cephalopod's colors shifted in complex patterns, and though Mara couldn't translate them precisely, she felt a resonance with her own thoughts. Not just alien biology to be studied and exploited, but a consciousness to be engaged and understood. The station's intercom activated. Dr. Ellison to Research Bay 3. The new communication interface is ready for initial testing. Mara smiled. The interface, a system designed to facilitate controlled, safe exposure to minute amounts of the compound for trained researchers, represented the beginning of a new approach, not forcing alien life to serve human purposes, but creating genuine dialogue between species. As she turned to leave, she glanced once more at the tank. The cephalopod had extended a delicate tendril toward the glass where her hand had been, its colors pulsing in what she now recognized as a farewell pattern. We'll get it right this time, Mara promised. Fear doesn't work on free minds, but understanding might. Auriga Outpost's observation deck offered a panoramic view of the gas giant and its moons. Mara often came here during off-duty hours, finding that the vast celestial vista helped put human concerns into perspective. Tonight, The gas giant's swirling storms created patterns of amber and indigo against the darkness of space, while the methane seas of the moon below reflected distant starlight. She was not alone. Lieutenant Ortiz stood by the main viewport, gazing outward. The medical officer had become Mara's closest ally in the weeks since the incident, her scientific curiosity matching Mara's own. "The first volunteer group starts training tomorrow," Ortiz said, as Mara joined her. 20 researchers from various disciplines, all eager to experience the compound under controlled conditions, and all fully informed of both the risks and the potential. Mara added, "That's the crucial difference from before. No hidden agendas, no military applications disguised as scientific inquiry." Ortiz nodded. "Governor Zhao is still walking a political tightrope. Central Command isn't entirely happy about losing a potential tactical advantage. They lost a weapon but gained something far more valuable," Mara countered. "Imagine diplomatic missions equipped with the ability to truly understand alien perspectives, not just through translation algorithms, but through direct experiential sharing." "Is that what it was like?" Ortiz asked hesitantly. "When you connected with the others during the incident?" Mara considered the question carefully. She had described the technical aspects of the experience in her official reports, but the subjective reality defied conventional language. "It was like," she began, searching for the right words, "like suddenly realizing you've been living in 2 dimensions and discovering a third. Not just hearing others' thoughts, but experiencing their perspective as your own, while simultaneously maintaining your identity. The boundaries between self and other became permeable, but not erased." "And the cephalopods, did you sense them too?" Mara smiled. "Yes, though more distantly. Their consciousness is structured so differently from ours that direct equivalence is impossible. But there was recognition, mutual awareness, the beginning of understanding." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the eternal dance of celestial bodies beyond the viewport. Finally, Ortiz spoke again. "There are rumors that some crew members have been experiencing residual effects, dreams shared between individuals who were connected during the incident, moments of unexplained emotional resonance with others." "I've heard the same," Mara acknowledged. "The compound appears to create neural pathways that don't entirely revert to baseline after exposure ends. Nothing concerning from a medical perspective, more like learning a language and retaining fragments of vocabulary after disuse." "And you? Any residual effects?" Mara hesitated. The truth was more complicated than she had included in any official report. While the intense telepathic connection had faded, she occasionally experienced flashes of others' emotions, particularly during moments of stress or strong feeling. More significantly, her connection with the cephalopods auriga had deepened in ways she was only beginning to understand. "Some," she admitted. "Nothing that interferes with normal function, but I'm monitoring it closely." The observation deck door slid open as Governor Zhao entered, her usual entourage of administrative assistants notably absent. "Dr. Ellison, Lieutenant Ortiz," she greeted them formally. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Governor," Mara replied. "We were just discussing tomorrow's training program." Zhao joined them at the viewport, her gaze fixed on the distant stars. "I received a communication from Colonial Administration headquarters today. The Ethics Committee has completed their review of our research protocols." Mara tensed slightly. Despite the outpost's new direction, there remained those in administration who viewed her work with suspicion, particularly those with military connections who had supported Captain Yates's approach. "Their conclusion?" she asked carefully. "Full approval," Zhao said, a slight smile softening her usually composed features. "Furthermore, they've allocated additional resources for expanding the communication research. Your approach has been vindicated, Dr. Ellison." Relief washed through Mara. "That's excellent news, Governor." "There's more," Zhao continued. They've also approved your request for a dedicated science vessel to explore the deeper regions of the methane seas. If there are more species like the cephalopods auriga with communicative capabilities, colonial administration wants them identified and studied. Properly this time. Ortiz looked surprised. That's unprecedented support for a xenobiology initiative. Usually, we have to fight for every resource allocation. The incident changed perspectives at the highest levels, Zhao explained. When the full report on Captain Yates's unauthorized experiments became public, it created significant political pressure for ethical reforms in extraterrestrial research. Left unsaid was how the incident had also changed Zhao herself. Once primarily concerned with administrative advancement, the governor had emerged from the crisis with a renewed commitment to scientific integrity. Mara's telepathic glimpse of Zhao's mind during the incident had revealed a woman struggling to reconcile ambition with principle, and in the aftermath, principle appeared to be winning. The exploration vessel arrives next month, Zhao concluded. I trust you'll assemble an appropriate research team, Dr. Ellison. After the governor departed, Mara remained at the viewport, her thoughts turning to the vast, unexplored depths of the moon below. What other consciousness might be waiting there? What other forms of communication might be possible? You're going to lead the expedition yourself, aren't you? Ortiz asked, reading Mara's expression. Mara nodded. There's so much we don't understand yet. The cephalopods auriga may be just the beginning. And if you find more species capable of producing consciousness-altering compounds, then we approach them with respect and openness. Mara replied firmly. The old paradigm of exploitation nearly led us to disaster. We have the opportunity to establish something better, true communication rather than domination. As she spoke, Mara felt a familiar resonance at the edges of her awareness. The distant minds of the cephalopods auriga in their laboratory habitats. Their consciousness brushed against hers like a whisper, not with words, but with impressions, curiosity, recognition, anticipation. They were aware of the planned expedition, she realized. Somehow, they understood that humans were preparing to explore their native environment more deeply. And they were pleased. The emotional tenor was difficult to interpret precisely, but it carried no fear or resistance. Dr. Ellison, Ortiz's voice brought Mara back to the present. You seemed distant for a moment. Just thinking about possibilities, Mara replied, not yet ready to share the full extent of her continuing connection with the cephalopods. Some discoveries needed time and careful documentation before they could be properly communicated. We should get some rest before tomorrow's training session, Ortiz suggested, moving toward the door. Mara nodded, but remained by the viewport a moment longer. Below, the methane seas shimmered with reflected starlight, concealing depths that human explorers had barely begun to fathom. Beyond the station's reinforced walls, the vacuum of space stretched to unimaginable distances, filled with worlds and minds waiting to be discovered. The fear that had once defined humanity's approach to the unknown, the reflexive desire to control, weaponize, and dominate, had nearly corrupted a remarkable opportunity for growth. But fear, as Mara had demonstrated, held power only over those who accepted its premises. Free minds could choose a different path. As she finally turned from the viewport, Mara felt the distant consciousness of the cephalopods auriga once more. Not a single mind, but a collective awareness that encompassed individual identities within a greater whole. Their final impression before the connection faded registered as something like anticipation. They were waiting to show humanity something more, and this time, Mara was determined to ensure that humans were ready to truly see. The observation deck door closed behind her, but the vista of stars remained, countless points of light, each potentially illuminating worlds where other minds contemplated the same cosmic darkness. Not enemies to be feared or resources to be exploited, but fellow travelers in the vast journey of consciousness. And in that understanding, Mara found both purpose and peace.